Recently around here, we had a lot of fog. And whenever that happens, I like to grab my hat and my coat and go out to take moody but lonely shots like the ones that you see on your screens right now. Hello and welcome. This is a video series where I'm taking a photo from raw file to final edit and showing you my entire editing workflow. Along the way, I'm hoping somebody will learn something, and at the same time, I'm promoting the Lightroom tools that I've developed and I'm using every single day. So let's jump into Lightroom. Let's start the edit by switching from Adobe Color to Adobe Standard, a more neutral camera profile, and the first order of business is obviously to fix the white balance. I'm assuming these light posts are around 3000 Kelvin. But to see better, I'm boosting the vibrance and saturation to 100%, and now I'm starting to drag on the white balance slider. I'm doing this until I see a clear separation between the pockets of light created by the lights and the environment around me. And it seems that because of the warm Christmas lights, it's even lower than 3000 Kelvin as I predicted. I'm also going to increase the tint just a bit so we don't have this ugly green over here, but I'm gonna worry about that a bit later. Now let's reset the vibrance and saturation, and we have a neutral starting point for our edit. And before I go any further with my edit, I want to figure out the exposure throughout my image. First of all, I'm gonna remove the chromatic aberration and enable the lens profile, and then I'm going to go into our basic tabs over here and increase the contrast just a bit, increase the highlights because I want more glow around the light poles, increase the shadows just a bit to get more details, but I'll keep in mind that I shot this at ISO 1000 and I don't want a ton of noise. I'm also gonna increase the whites a bit more, again to get more bloom out of the lights, and the blacks are okay where they are right now. And before I start masking, I'm gonna use the visual helper. This is a tool that I created, and all it does is apply a mask turning the photo black and white so I can better determine the values in the photo without being affected by the color contrast. First mask I'm gonna create, it's a linear gradient, super simple. I just want a bit of a darker foreground over here, something like this. I'm also gonna add one more linear gradient on the upper part of the image to get a bit more details out of the shadows. And I think that's about it for exposure right now. Let's disable the visual helper. It's lacking a bit of contrast, and I'm gonna push it just a bit more over here. It's about time I start to look around for a color response curve that would fit this image. Because it was shot at night, I'm thinking about cine still, but I'll also check the other color response curves that I have in the same pack created for cinematic night shot. And if you want it as well, you can find it on my website. Today I'm going with Vision 250D because of the cyan greenish tints that it can create around my lights. I'm also gonna boost up the saturation just a bit more and the vibrance as well. And now let's play around with the calibration tab. The photo has a lot of blues and some yellows, and I want some orange and warmth into it as well. So I'm going to drag to the left the blue primary. This way my yellow shadows over here are turning a bit into orange, and as well I'm gonna boost the saturation in the red channel. This gives me a nice blue and orange look, but that's not what I'm after today, so I'm pushing the green primary a bit to the right as well to get more reddish tones in my shadow. And because I'm going with the film emulation, let's also apply some grain. My grain preset applies different amount of grains to the highlights, midtones, and shadows. This aims to emulate the way grain behaves in real life, and today I'm going with the 800 variant. I know that's a bit heavy for some of you, but I think it fits the bill with a night shot, and I'm also going to apply a film limiter so we lift our blacks just a tiny bit. The filmic tone limiter is just lifting the blacks and lowering the highlights, but it's doing it with a custom curve instead of 2 points so it doesn't affect the entire image. Now let's come back to the image. I'm gonna drop the global sharpness and instead create a mask. I'm gonna go to select object. I'm gonna select my subject over here, intersect this mask with a linear gradient because I want more details in the upper part of the body, and apply local sharpness over here instead of having sharpness all across the image. This goes well paired with a bit more texture and maybe even a bit of clarity, so I'll have some details pop out on my hat. And now I'll turn my attention to the color grading wheels. I want a bit of blue in my shadows, especially for this upper part right here. I'm gonna add some orange in my midtones so I get contrast with the blue in the shadows. And I'm also gonna add a bit of cyan in my highlights. I'm gonna increase the luminance of said highlights to get more bloom out of my light poles. And I'm also going to start playing around with local adjustments for color. I noticed that on this upper part right here, my blues are a bit too much into purple, so I'm gonna use the HSL to nudge them just a little bit. Also, the aqua in the upper part of the light pulse is really strong, so I'm gonna nudge it towards blue and also desaturate both of them just a bit. And to counteract all the blue that I have in the image, I'm gonna increase the amount of orange that I'm pumping into my midtones. And now I have two problems that I wanna deal with before moving on into curves. First one is this upper part of the light pulse. It was a bluer looking LED light, and that really clashes with the colors that I have in the photo. So I'm gonna desaturate the blue color and make it stand out a bit less. And I'm also going to drag the aqua down just a bit to accompany it. This way, all the blue that I had in the sky naturally, it's kind of desaturated. So I'm gonna have to pay attention to the hue of blue that I'm pumping in my shadows to make sure that mixes well and I don't have banding inside my gradients. And since this did not fix my problem, I am also going to increase the luminance value of the aqua and the blue to make it less visible and mix a bit better with the pool of light around it. My second problem is that I'm having second thoughts on my first mask. This linear gradient over here is making it that the first light pole has no more light cast onto the ground, and that helped me ground the character into the scene. So I'm gonna replace this mask, and instead of a linear gradient, I'm gonna use the outside of the radial gradient, something like this. I'm gonna position it that I still have the highlight over there, and from it I'm going to subtract a linear gradient so it only affects the bottom part of the image. Again, I'm lowering the exposure just a bit, and I'm also gonna increase the feather so the transition is a bit smoother. The next thing that I want to address is how faded the entire photo is. And for that, I'm going to use the curves panel. I'm going to raise the black point just a bit because I want to crush the shadows quite a lot. And let's create some contrast with a strong S curve. This will make the entire image pop because of the contrast, but if I'm not paying attention, the pulse of light will be way too big and way too contrasty. So let's dial it back just a bit and raise the midtones a bit as well so more details in the photo become visible. I'm going to add a few more points in the highlights to make sure that even the blown out parts are not really too bright, even though I want them to be pretty bright and feel like they are bright in the final image and create contrast. I'm also going to add one more point in the shadows so I can create some local contrast over there. This one goes up and the one to the left goes down a bit more. And even though it looks like I'm going to clip the entire image into black, my filmic tone limiter that I have right here, it's protecting me for getting pure black into the image just by these two tiny points on its curve line. The image also feels a bit cold to me, so I'm going to increase the white balance just ever so slightly. And I think I want a bit more contrast as well. Also, it's a good idea whenever you're editing to look at the photo from different zoom levels. This way, you have a better chance of figuring out how it will look on something like a mobile phone or a bigger print if you zoom in a lot more. And when I zoomed out, I realized that the vignetting is really strong, so I'm gonna increase the compensation just a bit. And I think I want a bit more details in the lower part of the image because it's getting a bit too dark. So let's tweak this mask and increase the part that I'm cutting off and maybe decrease the amount just a tiny bit. I'm also going to add a bit of texture to the entire image as well as clarity for some micro contrast. At this point, even though I could spend the next hour tweaking little things, the image is pretty much done. But I want to show you another cool trick before I go, because I built my entire look based on color response curve, but I still have the Adobe standard camera profile. I can now go to my camera profiles built with color response curves and check out what other color palettes this might spit out. A lot of them might look a bit weird, and the highlights might be a bit too bright, but every time I might get inspired to tweak the colors a bit more based on them, or even apply one of them to get a completely different vibe to the entire image. And for this photo, I actually went through 4 color iterations. Once again, here is the raw file straight out of the camera, and here's the one that I did during this video. This one is based on Vision 250D, and it's strong in contrast, very saturated, and I went for a more cinematic and stylized look. The next one is with a bit less contrast and more natural tones. This one is based on Fujicolor 200 color response curves, and it gives the photo a warmer and more relaxed vibe. In edit number 3, I was going for the Cinestill look without the halation because we can't really do that inside of Lightroom, but I do have the low amount of details in the shadows, the greenish tint all around the image, and warmer highlights. And for this one, I actually pushed the filmic tone limiter a bit harder to get that fade. And for the last one, I went with a more creative edit and resembled a poster from something like a horror movie. So I pushed a lot of green in the shadows with the color grade wheels and reduced the amount of light that the light poles are emitting for a stronger contrast. And that's it for today. 4 edits on one photo. Let me know which one is your favorite in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the photo and learned something along the way, maybe share it with a photographer friend. I'll see you in the next one.